Good morning, good evening, good wherever you are. Welcome to It's All About the Grey podcast. I'm pleasured and honoured to be joined here with James Limnios, second generation owner of Limnios Property Group. James, pleasure having you, getting your time today and having you on the podcast.
Pasquale, always a pleasure. You know I enjoy your company. And thank you for having me here.
You're welcome, as I do with you, James. So I will just quickly chatting off camera earlier, but James, you want to tell us a story about how the business came to be? Correct me if I'm wrong. Your parents, Athanasios and Helen, founded the business in 1969. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes.
My father and mother were running a fish and chip shop, as Greeks do. And they were newly married, and my dad was buying his first home and in Nollamara. And what happened? A gentleman that I can't help myself but call Mr. Vallelonga, and whenever he sees me, he says, "You call me Tony." I said, "I can't, Mr. Vallelonga, you knew me before I was born." Anyway, Mr. Vallelonga used to be in real estate. He's the former mayor of Stirling, and I have a lot of respect for him. He came to the shop, and he came with a suit and his briefcase, and he pulled out a contract, and my father was about to sign to buy his first home with my mum. And he said, "Hey, paesano," he said, my dad said to me, about the only Italian he knew then. He said, how is it that your English and my English about the same, maybe mine's a bit better, but you're wearing a suit, a tie, and you smell of cologne, and I'm wearing an apron and I stink of fish. He said, how does this work? And he said, "Well, come and sell real estate. I'll get you a license." And he got my father a license, and my father started selling, and he was a very young man and newly married, and was working with the Italian crew, the Mr. Vallelonga and the Alessandrino brothers. It was a time that my father never ever forgets, and some great memories that he has, and he keeps talking about them now.
I bet. And for context, because I will disclose that Mr. Vallelonga is also my godfather. So
really? That's right. You told me last time.
It goes deep. Mr. Vallelonga, very well respected. Paisan, definitely. He's done a lot for a lot of people.
Yes.
And for that, we're very grateful. So, James, you've obviously had a bit of an illustrious career yourself. You were in the business, then you moved on, and then you've come back. So do you want to maybe tell us a bit of insight into that transition, through the business?
Well, I got into the business in 1989 when I finished high school, and I went the following year. At the beginning of the following year, I started at a college because I didn't sit my then TEE exams because I'd broken my wrist playing soccer against Bayswater, against the Italians. I was a goalkeeper and they smashed my wrist. But I couldn't write, so I couldn't sit the exam. Anyway, it was a very tough time, and as a young man, I still do admire my parents, and I love my family very much. And I remember coming home and seeing my father home early one day, and I said, "Well, what's going on?" And my mum said, "Oh, the market's really bad. It was the recession we had to have. Interest rates were high." And I said, "Look, I'll get into the business. I'll help." My dad said, "Hey, you're only a kid." So what I did until I was able to get my license, I started to learn the job, and I started to talk to people, and I would introduce my father to different opportunities because I didn't have the license to sell. And then a few months later, I got my license and started selling real estate, and I gave him my word that I would finish my education. I would go to university. And so what I did during my career, I did a diploma in property, and then from there I sat an exam and got into the Executive Master of Business at UWA, and I completed that. And that's how I got into real estate.
And obviously, since your father and now probably even since yourself, have you felt that the dynamic has changed in real estate over this, probably the last, it's been 55 years since Dad had started the business? Have you felt it's changed, or it's pretty linear?
Of course it's changed. Real estate is a fast-moving industry with regards to technology and legal obligations that keep changing, a lot of different laws that come into place, a lot of acts that come into place. So you must keep up with all of those things. But the fundamental thing that will never change is that real estate, residential real estate, is where people live. So the human aspect is very important, including in commercial real estate. I think in order to be successful in real estate, you need to be able to communicate with people, you need to understand people, and you need to be able to be clear in what you're saying.
Yeah, I do agree. There's a big emotional aspect to real estate, particularly buying your first home, which is something that we're going to discuss at length today. It is for what our generation, we see it as quite challenging to break into the market, and it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts. But before we get into that, James, the broader business, leasing, property development, property management, residential sales, retirement living, you have a vast range of services that you offer. Is there a particular reason you've built the business out that way, or that's something that Mum and Dad had started?
No. Our business was traditionally built to service the European community at the time. Right. So a lot of the migrant families, the Yugoslav families, the Italian families, the Eastern Europeans, Vietnamese in the 80s, they were the client base that we had, and we basically supported their investment and housing needs. There was a period of time that I left the real estate practice and I started a project management and development management business with my wife, who is a PhD graduate in corporate resilience and sustainability, a civil engineer, an MBA, a surveyor, and a graduate from the AICD, Australian Institute of Company Directors, so am I. So this lady is an extremely intelligent lady, and she decided that she had had enough of academia. It was, Eleanor's a very honest person and doesn't like bullshit and fluff, and doesn't like people insinuating things or playing politics or whatever. So in her mind, the academic side, she enjoyed the academic, the research, the lecturing and what have you, and dealing the interface with the students, but she didn't enjoy the background, the politics that goes with academia, or any large organisation, or any industry. So anyway, Eleanor decided to leave that and join me in starting our own project management, development management, advisory business. And that also gave the opportunity for the family business, which was the family real estate business, to have some air and to think about progression and to think about succession. Because if things remain the same, nothing changes. So I need to give some space to allow my father and my mother and my two sisters to have a think about what is it that's the best way forward. So for about 5 or 6, 7 years, I can't recall, I was running and building our own projects, smaller projects, but doing third-party work for some of the well-known property developers in Perth, who I admire and have a lot of respect for. People like Adrian Finney and Saraceni and some others. And again, migrant families who have shaped this state, and very intelligent people. But not just intelligent, they're good people. And that's the most important thing, the human side, yeah.
Tend to agree. And again, like we were discussing earlier, it's difficult to find these type of people in businesses and in all walks of life as well. Sometimes.
Sorry, just to finish off the question, I'm so sorry because
okay.
I veered off. But and then when I went back to the real estate practice, I actually took over the shareholdings, and we had an arrangement in place as to how that was going to happen. And the reason I decided to have the multifaceted business was because we've been around for so long and our client base is so vast. The demand for advice that people could really trust was so high that we thought, hey, we need to be able to offer these services to people, because they would come to me and they'll say, okay, this site now, what do I do with it? Who should manage this? Who should be the project manager? What's a development manager? How do I negotiate a construction contract? How do we make sure that the bank is happy with this particular outcome and design? And so we felt that that was a service that people needed, because people love property. People wanted to get into property. So we've created this holistic service, but we've also brought in experts that partner with us that have huge amount of history in construction, in shopping centre developments, in aged care facilities, in retirement. So it's not just James Limnios, a jack of all. That's not me. I'm the relationship person. People like Eleanor and Armando and Michael and Charles and others are the actual people that understand and do the day-to-day when it comes to these projects.
Execute,
yeah.
Yeah, well, I think you alluded to earlier, when you've got such a vast client base that demands a lot, the business needs to evolve, and I think you've done an exceptional job to take the family business to that next level, and hopefully it will continue to follow suit.
If God wants it, it'll happen.
Yeah.
As long as we have faith and we do the right thing by people.
And that's what's important, doing the right thing by people, because that holds its weight in gold, rather than transactional relationships, which happens all too often.
Yeah.
James, you're quite open in your views on different property matters, which is the purpose of today's podcast, to get some insight into what we see here in WA, what we see as a nation, the housing crisis that is probably still yet one of the most spoken about issues, where we've got a federal government setting some targets that are largely unrealistic, and there's some interesting aspects that we share similar views on, that you've probably educated me on, which I didn't know existed. But why don't we start with some of the pieces that you've discussed recently? So, in one of your more recent articles in the West, you spoke about our infill targets being unrealistic. So, the stat was 168,000 homes per year within the infill, and in WA alone, there's 2,635 knockdown approvals each year, and only 59% of them are one-for-one replacement. So the metropolitan area is expanding, but you believe we're probably missing the point, and we should rather focus on urban infill. So do you want to maybe share some insight into that?
Absolutely. These statistics exist. It's not me that's coming up with these numbers, but there's a particular number that fascinates me that people just, if they sat down and thought about it, they would be going, what the hell are we doing? It costs it's 1/3 of the cost to upgrade roads, schools, and all the necessary infrastructure to accommodate urban infill versus greenfield expansion. If you think about what it costs the taxpayer for those hundreds of kilometres of new freeways and then extending them from 2 lanes to 3, and then 3 is not enough, and then we go to 4, and getting water and power and all the amenity that needs to go out to these places, what it costs versus urban infill. Now, urban infill does not mean inner city living only. It does not mean towers. And that's what a lot of the people that have a vested interest in housing development say, well, not everyone wants to live in an apartment. Not everyone wants to live in a high-rise. I'm not talking about high-rise. Perth, in my opinion, is not a high-rise New York City yet. There's room for it in certain parts of the city, yes. I'm talking about urban infill. What does urban infill mean? Grab a 15-kilometre ring around the city, 20, and look at all the land that's sitting there, that's owned by government, that was held because there might have been a freeway extension, or there might have been something there, or it didn't work, or whatever. Look at all those holdings. How can we turn them into infill? And infill means villas, townhouses, small homes, cottage homes in these areas. Infill means main arterial roads, 5 levels. Whenever we go to Paris and we go to Rome and we go to Athens and these beautiful cities, we come back and we go, wow, that was wonderful. We loved it because there was history, there was charm, there were 4 and 5 story buildings, and at the bottom there was the baker, the shoemaker, the grocer, the butcher, and there was that buzz, there was that activity. That's what I'm talking about. And this Subiaco, Bayswater, Maylands, Inglewood, Jundana, Chewett Hill, Yukon, all of these areas are prime for urban infill, for increasing the density. Why is it that you should have R20 on certain lots and R30? Just stupid things that don't make sense in some areas. And I'm not talking about going into someone's suburban area and tree-lined streets and then saying, no, all of these now have to become 10-unit sites. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about main arterial roads. And there are certain sites, though, within suburbs as well, that lend themselves for a second property to be added on there.
So let's continue that discussion. So why then, at least as a state government, do we have this urban sprawl? What is it? Because there's a political agenda to expand the metropolitan area and make it larger? Like, what's your view?
Look, I'm not sure. I don't think people have thought about it carefully. That's what I think. I think there's some very powerful developers out there that believe in slicing and dicing and chopping bushland for hundreds of kilometres and making them into blocks. I don't think. You see, we've got to remember this. Politicians often get blamed for a lot of things, right? But unless you've been in their shoes, it's very difficult to understand how the system works. Most politicians want to do the right thing. In their heart of hearts, they want to do the right thing. The problem is the levers underneath, the machine underneath, the bureaucracy underneath. That is what often pushes policy, pushes agendas and creates issues. So I don't know how to answer that question, and I'm not sure it's a politically motivated thing. I just think there's not enough thought going into it.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think my understanding is when forming policy, a lot of consultants are engaged to provide supporting data which allow them to make a more informed decision. And supposedly, yes. And more often than not, it may be for this issue that, there might be an agenda of sorts. Who really knows? But I can understand your view, particularly given that, and we said this earlier, like you're flying out of Perth.
Oh, it's embarrassing.
Yeah, and you keep flying and flying and flying and flying, and then you go, to what end? And then, on the opposite, say you're flying into wherever it is, Europe, China, Japan, whatever, and you're flying into these main arteries, and they're just so developed in the main cities.
Whereas when you're flying into Perth,
Country
the biggest
town.
joke, right?
Yeah.
The pilot, it's usually dark as you're coming in, and the pilot's going, "Oh, get ready, we're about to land," and all you can see is black, couple of lights. As you're getting lower, you start to see a few cars like ants trying to move around.
Yeah.
Everything's flat, and then in the distance somewhere you see it looks like a little handful of sprouted little buildings, and that's it.
St. George's Terrace. Yeah, it's true.
So we need to think about it. I would grab a texter and I would go, just draw a ring around the city and go, let's make this happen.
Yeah, and I think the other challenging piece is if you go into Perth City, St. George's Terrace on a Saturday mid-morning at 10 o'clock, as I was here last weekend, honestly, St. George's Terrace is about 10:15. It genuinely felt like a country town. There was very little activity. A lot of the shops were closed. There is a degree of homelessness within the city, which was quite prevalent at that time because there's not a lot of people in the city. I think that in itself is challenging.
It's not a good look.
It's not a good look. So maybe through this urban infill, it may drive more people back into the city, so that then there is a bit of economic activity, and a coffee shop or a restaurant or whatever it is could probably justify that Saturday trade, because I think that's a challenge in itself, right? Is we want this retail precinct to come back into, and we're just using Perth City for example, but unfortunately the people aren't there.
It's a credit to R.M. Williams because they've opened up on the terrace.
Yes.
And I thought that was wonderful. And hopefully there'll be others that are inspired. There was also a time in the near distant past, it wasn't that long ago, when Perth City was the only 7-day trading. So on Sundays, if you wanted to go shopping and if you wanted to do anything, I'm talking while I was in council too, the other centres in the suburbs weren't open, so there would be a buzz around the city. But urban infill will fix that issue, because with people comes eyes on the street, comes safety, comes security, comes everything. You don't feel safe when there's not a lot of people on the street. you feel vulnerable. And that's why it's very important that we protect our capital city. We protect it. We've got to make sure that we have people coming. We incentivise people to come.
Yeah, I tend 100%. And I know it's probably the wrong, maybe it's somewhat an irrelevant comparison, but if you compare this to Sydney, where you'd go into the city on a Saturday, yes,
it's flying.
Yeah, yes, there's a lot more people there, but I also think that's the way they've developed it as part of this urban infill development, is that there's activity there and there's people there and there's, you can go to I went to a dumpling place. I couldn't even remember where it was, but it was on the main drag there, near St. Martin's. Like it was busy.
George Street or something.
Yeah, it was busy. There was a lot of people in there. And then, as I said, you fly into Perth and you go, I don't know very many people that would say, oh, let's go to the city on a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock for breakfast. It just doesn't exist.
Correct.
And if it does, there's probably a minority. So
we've got our hotels in the area there. So you just visualise this, that we're becoming a hub here, the airport, the big expansion of the airport.
$1 billion expansion, yeah.
Unless we activate our city and protect our city and encourage that activity, what's the impression going to be? They land, go for a walk, and they're looking around and, where am I? Tumbleweeds going down the terrace. It's not good.
No, it's not a good look. Bit of a ghost town. So to that effect, James, if you had the opportunity to move the needle in the next 12 to 24 months, specifically around this urban infill, what specific rule change would you put in? It's a bit of a loaded question. It may not be one rule change. It might be a number of different ideas, but is it as simple as, not as simple, but is it let's develop a strategy, it's a long-term play and making changes in that manner, or you think there's some quick fixes?
I would do a few things, right? First of all, I commend the government for doing the ferries, expanding the ferry service. I pushed that for years when I was on council, because I can see the benefit that Sydney has, and I see the benefit that even Brisbane has. And Brisbane doesn't have the same river system that we do. Ours is fantastic. Now, if we get it right, that water ferry service can become an amazing public transport, but also tourism opportunity. Whenever I go to Sydney and I've got a bit of time, I love jumping on that ferry and just letting it take me wherever it wants to take me, and getting off somewhere and having a coffee or having some lunch and then coming back. And I love it. That's number one. But I also think we need to do a light rail system that needs to link up the inner suburban areas, like they've done very well in Melbourne. That in itself will also make the city more accessible and better. The next thing we need to do, so we need to support the population, right? But we need to also, draw a ring around the city, 15, 20 kilometres, whatever it is, and start to identify and put nothing off the table. So be able to have a piece of land, and as long as it meets this design excellence, it creates some thought leadership, to be able to encourage that to come through. There's other things that they do in Sydney that we don't do here and in Melbourne. They call them boarding houses there, but it's not a boarding house traditionally that you think. They use the boarding house licensing or zoning to allow you to build micro apartments. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. You create some really good lifestyle facilities, common facilities, and you have micro apartments, about 35 square metres, very well suited to students, professionals, people who unfortunately might have divorced and they're in between sort of where they're going to live, and they live there from anywhere from 3 to 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, but it's 5-star and it's not that expensive. So you need to be able to create product to suit the demand. Not everything has to be a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, double lock-up garage. So we need to think outside the square. And the other thing that's the problem is banks, finance, trades. We don't have enough builders that can build, that feel comfortable in building multi-level buildings. We've got as many home builders as you like, but what we call commercial style builders, we need to have more of them. For example, we've only got 1 or 2 tier 1 builders, and these guys are not interested in my apartment complex when they've got billions of dollars of government infrastructure projects. There's a lot more money there. There's an easier negotiation there than what it is to try and negotiate with the private sector. But also banks. Banks are difficult. Their financing rules are so strict and stringent that it's very difficult to collaborate with a builder because they're demanding fixed price contract. Well, in order for a builder to give me a fixed price contract, they have to load the price for escalation and for all these things. Everyone loses. Everyone loses. So we need to, this is not about government only. This is all the stakeholders, the APRAs of the world, the banks, the government, the planners, insurance. Everyone needs to come together to make this happen. Because you'd be silly to think that it's their fault.
No, I tend to agree. I think there's a lack of transparency, a lack of planning amongst different stakeholders that if you can bring them together, you'll get a better outcome. So speaking of which, in the government and this issue we're facing, obviously you've got the government-backed deposit scheme, the 5%, and my understanding is they're now pushing to reduce it in instances to 2%. Doesn't that just compound this problem that we've got?
Look, if you think about it, we're all human beings, right? And we've got vulnerabilities, and some people, when they're under a lot of pressure, they knee-jerk. A lot of things happen through lack of planning and lack of thinking through the long game. It's about now. What sounds good now? We spoke about it a bit earlier. You're right. You'll get a lot more people into housing. Of course you will. But you're going to get a lot more people into debt that they can't afford when something shifts. What that means is what happened in America, because in America they had 99%, 95%, 98%, 102% financing. When it got tough, they just said, here's the keys, thank you very much. It was great while it lasted. That's a problem. So whilst the market is running now as a result of this, I've been around that long that I've seen the cycles. I've seen 2 or 3 of them. I can guarantee you what goes up will come down. But when I say it will come down, it will just stabilise, right? It will come down, stabilise. People will panic. We'll see headlines, carnage. People will start selling. We'll go to home opens, and then we'll get everybody's a professional. They'll be coming to us and saying, well, did you read what the paper said? Properties are going to smash. No, I remember people telling me this for years, and now I can't get into them. And there's a famous little photo in my dad's office, right? And it said, there was a picture of this really old guy sitting there like a skeleton on a bench. He goes, this is a photo of the young man that waited for real estate prices to come down. Doesn't happen. They just sort of correct.
Stabilise.
So yeah, look, I think we're going to have a bit of a problem if we're not careful. And we just want to pray that the employment rates stay the same, interest rates come back, and then people can afford to hold their houses.
Yeah, I think that there is definitely a lot of levers that would have to be.
And they should use it, by the way, this lever, not for out in the sticks. It should be for infill. That's a way of getting more property. And people should live according to their means, right? Why do these kids, first home buyers, need 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, theatre room and enough room for their jet ski? Yeah, you don't need that stuff. You need to live within your means as well.
Yeah, and I'm of the opinion that it's not that we are more affluent in the current state of flux. I think we just have more debt.
Yeah, more ways of getting debt, and then but you're correct, but not the right kind of debt. Afterpay debt or credit card debt or, you know, people living beyond their means. And you know what the sad thing is? I was talking to some young people and they've made a decision that they want to live their life. They're on about $100,000 a year. They realise they can't get into the property cycle in their view, which I think you could. You go buy a 1-bedroom flat, rent it out. At least you're in the market, and that'll perform better than savings for you over time. Anyway, so what they said to me is every dollar they get, they basically spend it on renting the right property, leasing the right car, buying the latest iPhone, Prada shoes or whatever the kids wear, and spending every dollar they've got on lifestyle. And they said, life's short. I don't know.
It's a different way of thinking.
It's a different way of thinking.
It is a different way, and it's a different way of life. Yeah, obviously there's rent investing, which to me makes a lot of sense if you do it right. But I tend to agree that Gen Z is more, at this stage of their life, they're not interested in getting a house. They're interested in travelling the world, and seeing what else is out there. So they're not left wandering through life because, you know, the older generation, the more mature generation that is now transitioning their wealth is really the banker mum and dad, right? So there's that, you know, if you do this now while you're young, that's fantastic. But then when you get on in life, you know, have you given thought to what the next 20 years look like? And if and when you do have children, well, are you going to support them? Or is it going to be, no, I'm just going to put myself first for the rest of my life. I don't want kids. It's a whole different way of thinking.
It's a different way of thinking, that's right. And that is, I wonder, without being a conspiracy theorist, I wonder if that suits certain agendas. I don't know. There's, you know, to create this consumer environment, it's all about me. It's not all about the grey. It's all about me. What's in it for me? You know, I have to do what's right for me. Hang on. What happened to the collective good? What happened to community? What happened to family? And this is creating other situations that we see, and that is elder abuse. Because of the generational shift in wealth, the amount of pressure that's being put on parents to give money and to advance money to their children is actually not very nice. You can actually see it where an older person is selling an investment property that they've got because their son or daughter wants to buy a better house. And you could see that the father, the mother, in that instance, are not 100% comfortable about that. So there's a lot of things that are going wrong with our society, and they're slowly coming out with all of this stuff. I mean, if family was treated the way family was, you could solve a lot of these problems. If we made it cool to be a collective, and we made it cool to be a family, and we made it desirable to live together, and you don't have to live in each other's pocket, but you can create properties that give you your individual space and all the luxuries that you need in the world, but you're in the same building.
Bit of a compound style of
Compound,
yeah. Which again the Europeans did that quite a lot. I've seen.
My uncle did it. He built a magnificent home in the northern beaches, and he's got his grandkids. He's got his daughter and her husband, and him, and they're not in each other. They're separate but together. They love it.
Yeah, I grew up in a duplex, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. We shared the backyard. We had our separate houses, but you'd get out in the backyard and play soccer together, or you'd have a family dinner every second night, even sometimes every night, where you'd just eat together, go to school together, go to work together. My parents worked together, my dad and his sister worked together, et cetera, and that was just a way of life. And I think you're right. That's not cool anymore.
Yeah.
It's cool to travel the world, and it's cool to see, which is great. And being a relatively young guy myself, I get it. I understand, right? And a lot of my mates have travelled, and arguably they've seen far more than I've seen. And no shadow of a doubt, I know that I've made a concerted decision to do something today that in the long term, assuming it all pans out, I'll get that opportunity a bit later in life. But most people are more about the here and now, short term view. But yeah, well, time will tell. Time will tell, James. Another somewhat loaded question I do have is, there's the interstate market still views WA, or at least for the last probably 6 months, still sees WA as a bit of an opportunistic buy in, get the right yield, et cetera, et cetera. It's quite expensive, obviously, in Melbourne and Sydney, but notwithstanding that, WA's running at a rate that hopefully will start to cap out. It may not. Who really knows? Is there any, I'm going to call it a micro location or an urban infill location, that you would say, well, there's still some opportunity there, or is everything still really, really hot?
I don't think that used second-hand apartments have taken off where they should be. You could still buy one $500,000, $550,000, $600,000, 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, $450,000 for a 1-bedroom. These have not taken off yet. So there are huge opportunities to get into the property market and either rent or live in one of those. Now, I don't understand why a small family cannot live in an apartment. The average square meterage that people live in around the world, that takes in first world countries as well, is about 80 to 85 square metres. Here, our average is about 180 or 200 square metres. It's madness. So if you want to live a good life, don't measure it on what sort of house that person's living in. Measure it on what makes you feel comfortable, what makes you happy, what makes you financially comfortable. So a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment could easily have 2 children in it. If it's located in the right place, there's going to be community gardens, there's going to be stuff. There's no reason why 2 siblings cannot share a bathroom and a bedroom. There's no reason that can't happen. I have a friend in Greece. He's one of my best friends. He is so wealthy. This is a true story. When the Greek financial crisis happened, a particular bank called him in with his father and begged him not to do a run on the bank, not to take their cash out. So just imagine what sort of cash you've got to have to be able to do that. That guy there says to me, the best thing that ever happened to me in my life was sharing. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, he said, in Greece, and sharing it with my brother. My brother and I, from babies, were in that. And they, two different characters, but they are the term brother. They are it. That brings together families. That brings together. It's that. If I live in a big home, and you live in a 2-bedroom apartment, it doesn't make me better. I'm probably less happy than what you might be, because you can afford it. You're spending more quality time with people. You're outdoors. When my wife first came from Greece, she came here on a scholarship to do a PhD, all paid for, UWA, because she still holds the mathematics record in engineering in the University of the Aristotelios University in Thessaloniki. She came here and she saw the Beyond Blue ads, and she had no idea what this is. She goes, "What's this Beyond Blue?" I said, "It's depression." She goes, "It's depression?" I said, people don't feel well. She says, "You know what? In Greece, we're supposed to be a lot poorer country. We're supposed to not have what you've got. But let me tell you, I've never seen a Beyond Blue ad, and people are happy." And she goes, "I'll tell you what it is. When you walk outside here, it's winter, it's 6 o'clock. The street lights don't work. It's pitch black, it's scary, no one's outside, there's big fences on the front. There's no human interaction." She says, us poor people, well, she's not poor, her father's actually, but anyway, she was saying, us poor people, whether we've got €1 million or we've got €1, we walk downstairs, we buy some passatempo, we walk up and down the street, you say hello, you have a coffee, whatever. So that's why we need to create environments where we're not just stuck in some big house on our own. But I think that's an opportunity, the apartments.
And in closing, it has been a fantastic, insightful discussion that's definitely got me thinking a lot. If you were to give a piece of advice to young James Limnios in his mid-20s, specifically in respect of any property, whether it be resi, commercial, investment, or the like, what would it be?
Buy the best property in the best location that you can afford. And when I say the best property, so even if it's an old rundown property in the best location, so I would rather have an old rundown property in the best location than a very good property, like physically in a bad location. So it's location. I think they call it by the
worst house on the best street.
On the best street. And that is true.
Okay. Well, James, it's been fantastic having a chat with you. It's flown by. Hopefully it's going to be, hopefully it will be useful for any of the listeners. And if the listeners were or need some advice, where can they contact you?
I'm very happy for people to contact me directly. They can, james@limnios.com. That's my personal email address. And they could ring my office or whatever they like. I mean, I'm always there to help someone. If someone picks up the phone and says, "Look, I saw you speaking to Pasquale on the podcast, can I see you?" I always give my time.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate your time here today, and we look forward to continuing to stay in touch, and I'll be sure to share your contact details when the podcast goes live.
Thanks a lot for everything, mate.
Thank you, James.
Appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you very much.